All right, welcome to the Going Ballistic podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Kleckner. This is episode 13. If you want to find out some of the extra information I'm going to be talking about on this podcast or see some of the links I might mention, you can view those on the podcast website at goingballisticpodcast.com/the show number. So since this is show number 13, you can see it at /13, the number 13, 1-3. I appreciate it, guys. You guys visiting there and leaving some feedback. And seeing this extra information is great. As always, thanks for your support. Please, please, please spread the word. I mean, you guys leaving either good feedback on iTunes or on Google Play or telling others about this podcast is what is allowing us to grow each week, and I just really appreciate it. This week, we don't have Jason with us, which means two things. One, the audio quality might be a little bit better because I'm not patching in a phone call. But the conversation is not going to be as good because it's just going to be me talking about some updates that I have here. Again, the feedback you guys are giving is feeding a lot of the questions that we have for this episode. I plan on updating you on how Jason's build project is going, plus a brand new project that Jason and I decided to get into. It's just a good Kleckner contest. And I'll update you guys on the rules we came up with for that and where we're going with there. So after I mention all the support that we're getting, we'll get right into it. So first off, if you guys haven't yet heard me talk about my book, you are either living in a hole or it's the first time you've heard the podcast. Sorry to do it to you, but the support is what's keeping this going with some of the financial contributions, and I really appreciate it, everybody. I don't know where we're at now. Last time I checked, I think we're at about 8,500 copies sold, which blows me out of the water. I never knew that we'd ever sell that many copies of that book, so I really appreciate it. But 25% of the proceeds of that book go to support two really good military charities, the Sua Sponte Foundation and the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. They've been great supporters of the book, and of course they're very happy to see the donation checks come in from you guys. You guys' support's been great. We've also had some great industry support. So Sierra Bullets, I mentioned them last podcast, they're still giving giveaways. So I think it's been 10 days straight now. They're putting giveaways on their Facebook page. But they're giving away 1,000 bullets of your choice, plus a slew of other goodies. And they've been very gracious in putting a copy of the Long Range Shooting Handbook in each one of those giveaways so far. So I really appreciate it. But also, some of the other things, you get some free long-range targets. If you guys are looking for some targets next time you go to the range, they're discussed in the book, but they're also given away for free at the book's website at longrangeshootinghandbook.com. You can just click on targets and download those. They've been helpful to me, and maybe they'll be helpful to you, and they're free. So you're only going to be paying whatever it costs you for the paper and toner to print them out to see if you like them. But also, if you guys want to try some of the software that I really recommend for training, especially for handgun training, I've mentioned before, I really love the Laser app. That's LASR. It's an acronym, so Laser app. It's some software that I run on my computer. You can put almost any webcam hooked up to your computer, and by facing that webcam at a wall or a room, you can, on the screen of the computer, designate certain things in the view of the webcam as targets. And you use a laser training pistol, any one of them will work. When you use a laser training pistol, when the computer recognizes a laser dot on any one of the areas that you defined as a target, it counts it as a hit. And so you can set up IPSC-style stages with timers and maybe, or steel challenge stages where they have to be hit in a certain sequence. It's really fun, and I know I got Jason turned on to it and a few other folks. Every one of us has swears by. Every one of us loves this software for how fun it is when people come over to your house and how beneficial it is to our training and giving us some really good feedback. So you can get a training session in when you only have 5 minutes versus having to go to the range each time. And although you have to buy the software, it's certainly a lot cheaper than all the ammunition you might spend. If you put in the code Kleckner, just my last name, CLECKNER, Kleckner, you get 10% off, so that's not bad. 10% off on the app, and it helps support the podcast. That's a win-win. During this podcast, you might hear some slurping noises. I apologize. That's me enjoying my glass of Scotch. I'm drinking some Lafroig 10-year-old. If you like Scotch, you haven't tried Lafroig, this sounds like a commercial, but trust me, they're not giving me any money. This stuff smells like a campfire in your glass. Maybe I should let you guys know what I'm going to drink ahead of time so you can enjoy it with me during the podcast. But this is good stuff. Give it a shot. I think you'll like it. Okay. First news this morning. Fresh happened this morning. I had a squib. Now, I've only had 2 squibs in my life. This morning was the second one. Both of them have to do with reloads. Both of them are at least partially my fault. Out of the thousands and thousands of rounds I've reloaded, 2 squibs isn't that bad, but still it's 2 more than I want to have. So for those of you that don't know, a squib is a round that doesn't go off like it's supposed to. So for some reason that bullet doesn't make it out of the barrel, and not a bore obstruction. Some reason having to do with, the propellant or the load itself. Okay, so just because the round doesn't make it out of the barrel doesn't mean it's a squib. The round could not be to blame. But if the round doesn't make it out because of some fault of the round itself, we call that a squib. Now, I might be admitting something embarrassing here, but I kind of liked the Harry Potter books, okay? That's out there. I read through all the Harry Potter books. I thought they were fun, kind of a mindless read. And in those books, I thought it was funny that they talk about a child who was born to 2 wizard magical parents that didn't have magical powers as a squib. And immediately I saw the connection there as essentially something that didn't take off like it was supposed to, or something that didn't have the power it was supposed to, kind of fizzled out. So I thought that was kind of cute. You might see that word in everyday language, but a squib can be a very dangerous thing. So not in and of itself. The squib itself, I've never seen nor heard of the squib itself causing a problem. So what usually happens with a squib, the most common, usually, is there's no gunpowder in the cartridge. The primer alone is enough to usually unseat the bullet and get it stuck somehow in the barrel, because there's still a little bit of force there. What'll happen then is a shooter who's not paying attention, or who's in a hurry because they're in the middle of, who knows, a gunfight or a competition, and they're trying to hurry up and get their gun back up and running, is going to do what you should have been taught to do and tap, rack, bang. You're going to tap that magazine, rack that action, and try and get another round to fire. Well, if you weren't paying attention and you actually had a squib, when you put the next round in the chamber, if you can get it chambered, and you pull the trigger, you now have a bore obstruction. You now have a bullet stuck in the barrel, and there's a very good chance your gun is going to have what we call a catastrophic malfunction. That means the gun blows up. On AR-15s, that could mean simply the gun bulging a little bit, the magazine and parts blowing out the bottom, all the way to the gun actually shooting shrapnel off in all directions, barrels bulging. It can be a very, very, very bad day for you and for people around you, which is just a huge reminder. Always wear eye pro. I'm guilty of it sometimes, especially when I'm on a bolt-action rifle, not wearing eye protection. There's just as good of a chance as it happening then as it is with the guy next to me that might be at the range who's shooting his AR-15 and has a squib, and when his gun blows up, my eyes are just as prone to damage from his gun blowing up 5 feet away from me. So it's a good reminder for everybody. We have the safety protection for a reason, and it happens. It really does. Now, I said that a squib in and of itself usually isn't a problem. Well, it's not, because even though the bullet is stopping in the barrel and not making all the way out of the gun, you don't have guns blowing up unless there's a lot of pressure. And if the bullet didn't make it out of the barrel, that means you didn't have enough pressure. So it's kind of a self-solving problem, is if you didn't have enough pressure to get the bullet out of the barrel, as long as there wasn't an obstruction, but if there's not enough pressure on its own to get that bullet to go all the way out, there's probably not going to be enough pressure to blow the gun up, right? Because the path of least resistance is for that bullet to keep traveling down the barrel, even though it fits in the barrel very tightly. Some barrels can be so tight they can be very difficult to even hammer the bullet out of the barrel, depending on what caliber or you're shooting or the length of the barrel. So I had one when I was shooting a 1911. I was just loading 45 rounds by the thousands. Good buddy of mine. I used to reload together, and if you're getting started reloading, I've recommended to many people, find someone that's going to do it with you and team up with them and split the costs of everything. So all the equipment, all the components, and that way not only will you save some of the money, but you get someone to hang out with and have a couple beers with while you're reloading ammo. And we used to jokingly call ourselves Close Enough Reloading, because the pistol ammo we were loading was probably close enough. We weren't as precise as we could have been or maybe needed to be. But one time, one out of I don't know how many thousands of rounds, we allowed one round to sneak through where we placed the bullet on the brass and there wasn't powder inside. Thankfully, in the middle of the stage, the RO was paying attention because I was not. I immediately heard the malfunction. I'm racing from one target to the next. I go to get the gun back into battery, and the RO grabs my shoulder and tells me to stop. I listen to him. He takes the pencil out after we clear the gun, takes the pencil out from behind his ear, and we go to push it down the front of the barrel and notice there's something stuck in there. Now, we were able to get that one out just by taking a thick rod and hitting it very hard into the barrel. We were able to knock the stuck round out. But who knows what would have happened if he didn't stop me and I cranked that round off into the back of the other bullet. Well, today what happened is, you know those 300 blackout rounds I was talking about last podcast? I took some fancy pictures of, and I was so proud of this load I made with these 220 grain round nose bullets and how they were just so quiet. Well, maybe they were so quiet because they were barely coming out of the barrel. So I hadn't taken a chronograph to them yet. I take that back. I did take it to it once, but I tweaked the load a little bit. And the load is barely a compressed load, so I'm doing some funny physics there too. And I went this morning and I shot about 5 rounds, had a blast, how just insanely quiet they are. I was shooting them out of an H&R handy rifle. For those of you who don't know, that's a single shot break open rifle. And when I worked at Remington, someone told me, oh, you got to pick one of these up, a 300 blackout single shot rifle. And my first thought was, why in the world would I want the coolest, sexiest, newest technology round, that's debatable, I know, to some of you, of course, in this old-fashioned platform? You know, it's meant for a short-barreled AR-15. Why would I put it in a single-shot rifle? It's kind of like putting a spoiler on a Model T. Until I saw the rifle. And then even with a 16-inch barrel, because there's virtually no space taken up by the action, I can actually shoulder the rifle in my right shoulder and reach out with my right arm and touch the end of the barrel with my finger. So the gun is laughably tiny without being a regulated short-barreled rifle. It is such a blast to shoot. And I got it because I figured what a great hunting gun someday for my kids, because it's so tiny. You can shoot the subsonic rounds you want, maybe a supersonic round. And I love when you're teaching someone new to shoot, not having a gun that loads itself. You know, not having a semi-auto. So you can clearly have a round in, or clearly have a round out, clearly have it cocked with the hammer back or not. So I just thought it was a great gun. I got it. It's been a blast. So put my 6th round in of these loads I loaded up. Just amazed at how quiet they're leaving the gun and just smacking one of the steel targets so hard. 6th round goes in, pull the trigger, I hear a weird pop and a sound I've never heard before shooting a gun. I hear this loud hiss, and it took about a second for me to figure out what the sound was. Maybe longer, I don't know, but I pull the trigger, click, pop, and oh my god, I have a squib round, and that must be the gases escaping from around the bullet. So the bullet fits very tightly in the barrel, but if it's a standard rifling grooved barrel, the gas can escape by the bullet in the corners of where those grooves are cut between the lands in the rifling. And that must have been what was happening. So I hear this high pressure hiss for, 4-6 seconds, and then it dies off. And I was just, first off, amazed that I've never heard that sound before. Most likely because if I'm shooting a semi-auto, that gas would be redirected through the gas system and easily get out of the gun. But in this single shot, it was locked up in such a way that there's no place for the gas to escape. So the pressure was slowly going down. Well, after the 4 to 6 seconds of that loud hissing of the pressure escaping, I wait a couple more seconds and I slowly go to crack the action open. And even then, as the brass starts to pull back out of the chamber a little bit, even more hissing starts coming out. So I stop in this partially open position and let the hissing stop from there. And I think, okay, the pressure's all gone. I open the action all the way, and there's still enough pressure to pop the brass out about 10 feet behind me. You know, I made sure it wasn't pointing at my face. So that was able to retain quite a bit of pressure between the chamber and the stuck bullet. Again, a testament to wearing safety glasses. Not only with this single-shot rifle was there no place for the gas pressure to go, which means probably more likely of a chance to have this gun explode on me. But even something when you think you're done and you think the pressure's gone, if I wouldn't have thought about the brass popping out and kept it obviously away from my face, I could have taken a piece of brass in the face, which just as easily can hurt your eyes. So, guys, always wear eye protection. So immediately, Of course, I stopped shooting the gun. I put it in my gun case, and I just go to head home. I didn't even want to leave it out there. I figured even when I got home, I was going to have to put a zip tie or something around it to remind myself that there was a squib in there. Because heaven forbid, a couple months goes by and I go to shoot it again and forget. So I get home, I decide to at least see how far down the barrel of the bullet made it. Well, I take off the muzzle device that I had on the rifle, and to my surprise, I see more than half the bullet sticking out of the muzzle. And I thought it was the funniest thing. I ran inside, grabbed my nice camera and took some cool pictures, snapped a couple on my iPhone, and I threw them up on Instagram. So if you want to go see it now, you can see one post on Instagram of this cartridge that I'm so proud of, with this blunt round nose and this heavy bullet that I made. And the very next post, you can see that bullet sticking, 2/3 out of the end of my barrel because it failed to leave completely. You can also see, if you look at that picture, you'll see the cuts from the rifling, the lands and grooves that you're used to seeing in a bullet. Well, in between those, look carefully and you'll see a oblong or oval shape on the bullet too. So you'll see some rectangular diagonal striations in the bullet, and between those diagonal or hard edge striations, look for those oval shaped or maybe even flame shaped marks there. And what those are is the gas that was escaping out. So you can actually see like the kind of the torched mark, hot gases going by the bullet. It's really a cool sight to see. I was able to pull on the bullet enough and get the bullet out of the barrel. I also took a picture of just the bullet itself on the table and put that on the post. I also have that on the Facebook page. If you want to go check out the Long Range Shooting Handbook on Facebook, you can see those pictures there. So that was my big event for this morning, is not only did I have my second squib, but I actually got a squib so close to actually leaving the gun. And I don't know what happened yet. I'm going to diagnose it a little bit more. I'm going to go back and look at those rounds. I could have not had enough powder. I could have been having compressed loads on my other ones, which was giving me an artificial boost, and this one wasn't compressed. I could have big variations in my primers. I'm using Remington primers on these, which are just known for not having good consistency from primer to primer, but since this is kind of just bulk blinking ammo, I don't mind using them. I don't know if that was the cause. I also need to check the baffles in my can, because this silencer has given me troubles before. There's a chance that the bullet wasn't stabilized as it came out, and maybe it hit a baffle and stopped itself. So I will keep you guys updated on what happened on my second squib that made it so close to actually flying down range. So there we go. All right, so the AR-15 contest that I mentioned that Jason and I are doing, this is different than Jason's build, which he's almost done with. All he's waiting on is a gas block. He's got everything else ready to go. And our next podcast, I can't wait to update you guys on it. It looks really cool. It's going to be supremely accurate, I hope. But we'll be testing it, letting you guys know. But he and I were talking about how this was the most accurate AR-15 he could build. What about the cheapest one he could build? And we both laughed at the idea, because who in the world wants the cheapest AR-15? But he decided he wanted one, and I made some kind of comment like, I bet I can make one cheaper than you can, or better. And before you know it, we had a friendly bet going. So we immediately had to get some rules together to make sure we knew what we were going to be doing. And also, Jason is convinced I was going to cheat somehow. And maybe that's because I remind him that if you're not cheating, you're not trying. And you get caught cheating, you're not trying hard enough. But either way, he was convinced I was going to cheat. And I was concerned that we were just going to do the same thing. Meaning, you go on Palmetto State Armory and you look at their sale and they have a assembled lower receiver for something like $130. Well, that's about the cheapest you could possibly get all those parts together. So I told him, Jason, I don't want to do that, because he and I are both going to go and order the exact same components from Palmetto State. We're going to have the exact same gun, and what's the fun in that? So we decided that the lower had to be stripped. So no matter how we did any of the parts, you had to have a stripped lower to start with, so you couldn't buy anything pre-assembled, and that solved that problem. So that's the first rule. And I'll put all these rules up on the podcast website if you guys want to see the rules to follow along with our contest here. So number one is the lower must be stripped. There's no pre-assembled lowers. The second rule is that the upper must not have the barrel installed. So we decided it was okay if you bought an upper that had the ejection port cover and maybe forward assist installed already. That doesn't have to be stripped. But at least it can't have a barrel installed when it's sold. So rule number 3, if the part belongs, it must be used. So for example, if the end of your barrel isn't threaded, you don't need a muzzle device. That might be able to save you some money. Or if there's, for example, an upper is a slick-sided upper and it doesn't have a spot for a forward assist, well, then you don't have to buy a forward assist, so one isn't necessary. But if there's the parts there, or the holes there, so it can have an ejection port cover, you can't just leave it off. You gotta put it on there. So if the part belongs, it's got to be used. Number 4, the components we use must be available to the general public. Now, that's because Jason didn't want me going and getting any buddy deals, and I get it. So, no buddy deals. No homemade parts. We also went on that one too, because Jason and I both like to make stuff on our own. Everything that we're putting together for these 2 rifles for the contest, we're calling it the El-Cheapo build. You guys can do yourself. So what we're going to do is by next podcast, we will have a list of not only who won for price, but we'll have either a spreadsheet or a listing of every single component we used with a link and price to where you can get that online if you'd like to build one yourself. It also helps keep us honest on exactly where the parts came from. So number 4 is the components must be available to everybody. So that makes rule number 5 come into play too, is there's no auctions allowed. No eBay, no gunbroker, no anything like that. Because we wanted a firm price for the parts. We didn't want a random deal that one of us stumbled across for just that one item only. That kind of makes it not available for you guys. So although we can get things on sale, because the sales are always going to end or new ones are going to come along, no auctions. Number 6, no shipping or tax are counted in the price. We did that because we wanted to normalize the contest. He's in Arizona, I'm in Tennessee. You know, depending on what store we use, one of us or the other is going to get tax, one of us or the other is going to have more or less shipping. And it's going to be different for you guys too, depending on where you live. So we decided we're going to take those variables out to just normalize it for everybody. But shipping and tax, of course, are going to have to be included somehow for some of these parts for you guys. Now for the performance, because we can just build a cheap AR, but it's actually got to work. So rule 7 was the ARs have to fire 2 30-round magazines without a malfunction, which includes the bolt has to lock to the rear at the end of each of the magazines. So that's the very small durability test. Rule number 8 is it must be able to shoot a 5-inch group at 50 yards. So that's 10 minutes. That's really, really, really big group. But using the cheapest AR we can possibly get is not only going to be horribly cheap components, it's going to be horribly cheap optics, right? I mean, a set of iron sights is way more expensive than a $10 red dot you can get on Amazon. So we might have a really hard time even having sights that hold still on us, so it might be difficult to hit that group. No matter what, when I'm done testing it for the contest, I'm going to put a nice scope on the gun and use some nice ammo and actually see how good it can perform just for the sake of knowing, but not for the contest. And, of course, rule number 9 is the cheapest complete rifle that can meet all the above rules wins. So it's a little unfair because Jason wants to keep his, so he might not get the absolute junkiest thing he can get because he wants to be able to keep this rifle. Whereas I might be willing just to win a contest, have a really, really junky rifle. And also, I'm not going to keep the rifle. One of you guys is going to end up with it. I mentioned last time that I would consider, giving it away. I don't know how it's going to work yet. I don't know if I'm going to raffle it off and just have the money go to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation and the Suez-Wante Foundation. I don't know if I'm going to sell, just individual raffle, like do an auction or the raffle tickets or have a giveaway on just if you leave, good feedback for the book on a forum or something somewhere that would be entering in the raffle. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm open to you guys if you have ideas. Let me know. But somehow I'm going to get this El-Cheapo rifle, which is going to be a disgusting, barely working, but absolute cheapest rifle I can build into somebody's hands just for the novelty of doing it. You could say you have this stupid rifle that I built. But at the very least, I think it'll be fun for everybody. It'll be some inexpensive advertising for my book and for other things. And it'll be fun all the way around. Now, there's a lot of people out there that don't think we can break $500 and even more saying we can't break like $450 because that's the cheapest about you can find any AR out there. I think we can do better. So we'll see. I actually have all my parts ordered. I think Jason might too. I just don't want to tell you how much it might cost yet. I want to wait till next time where Jason and I can talk about it together and maybe have a little bit of suspense and see if you guys can look around yourselves and see what the cheapest AR is that you can build. so you can see if, when we tell you our numbers next time we do a podcast, how close or far away you are. So I think that'll be fun. All right, now to get to some questions for everybody. Sorry, this podcast is a big news update and question and answering session, but I got to do these every once in a while, I guess. Kyle had written an email to me and asked me, how do I account for the bore offset when I'm dealing with sighting or adjustments on a rifle? Now, he mentioned that he liked hearing the part about Jason's build where we're talking about the mounts and whether there's a 2 or 3 inch offset for the scope. So I'm not quite sure which offset he's talking about. So I'm going to address both. So if you're worried about whether you're going to have the 2 inch offset scope mount or the 3 inch offset scope mount affecting your zero, don't worry about it. I'm sure there's going to be a difference somehow, but not measurable by you for anything to worry about. Now, I'm talking about a mount that instead of having the scope mounted directly above where the rings are attached to the base, that allows the scope to slide forward on the rifle, so it allows you not to have to pull your head back so much. Because on the AR-15, that upper receiver doesn't go forward as far as most people would like. So by having a mount that mounts back on the AR-15 top, but then extends forward 2 to 3 inches, that's what I mean by an offset scope mount. I'm not talking about how high the scope is above the barrel. And there's a chance that's maybe what Kyle was talking about, or some of you might have been thinking. So I'm glad I got a chance to clear it up. When you're setting up ballistic software, where you're trying to do calculations on how to zero your rifle or to have dope at different distances, it often asks about a bore offset. And I could see that you might mistakenly think that's what I mean. So no, I'm not talking having your scope 2 to 3 inches above your barrel. I'm talking about having your scope 2 to 3 inches scooted forward. Now, how you measure it and use it in the real world is you literally need to take a measuring tape or a ruler and measure from the center of the scope to the center of the barrel. And that's your offset of the scope above the bore. And your ballistic software needs to know that because that's the angle that the barrel and the scope both make where they're going to be doing the adjustments. So if they're 10 feet apart versus in line with each other, there's completely different angles at play. So having a difference truly does affect how you adjust your rifle at different distances. However, it's not something that you really need to calculate yourself. So if you're using ballistic software, you're going to enter it into the ballistic software and it's going to do it for you. So it doesn't matter if your scope was a ½ inch higher or lower because it's taken care of. Now, as a rule, the lower everything is, the better, right? You don't want, again, the scope 10 feet high, but I'm more concerned about you having the scope at the right height for your head so that you're in a comfortable, good shooting position than you worry about minimizing the scope to the barrel. So what height should your scope be? Exactly the height it needs to be to fit you properly. Once it's there, if you're using ballistic software, you just enter that data into the software and it figures out what to do for you. Now, if you're not using ballistic software, and you might be then wondering, well, how then do I compensate for a higher or a lower scope? The answer? Don't. Don't get your head wrapped around that. You don't compensate for a higher or lower scope. You just have your scope and your rifle. And you take your scope and your rifle out and you shoot at 100 yards and you zero it. And if at 500 yards you need to come up 11 minutes of angle instead of 12 minutes of angle, well then next time you come up the 11 minutes of angle. It doesn't matter if it's because the bullet is slower or the bullet is less efficient or the scope doesn't track properly or the bullet's leaving different velocity because of the barrel length or whether it's because of your scope height. If you're just starting out especially, who cares? Well, all that matters is you turn it to 11 and you shoot 500 yards. So don't worry about doing the math on compensating between the scope offset because even if you could have 2 identical rifles, 2 identical scopes, 2 identical lots of sets of ammunition from the same lot, and one has a higher scope, and therefore you're saying, well, Ryan, I have the dope on one gun, this other gun's the same, except for the scope, height is different, how do I calculate for the difference? You still can't possibly isolate every other variable. So even if I did know the formula, which I don't, I'm sure you could figure it out somehow. I'm sure we could look it up and do it together. But it's not going to matter because even if you got that formula precisely right, you're still going to have some other variable also that's going to change it. So you know what you do? You shoot that actual distance, you record the environmental data, you record what it did, and you move on. Now, so that brings me to a good point. What I think is a good point. I'm not a huge fan of ballistic software. You guys should know that about me. I don't even have one of those nice Kestrel wind meters with ballistic software in it. And I know I need to get one. I know I do. It's like blasphemy. I don't even carry one around. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine, Jared Johnson of STA Training. Any of you who have ever asked me for training, who I recommend for training, or if I can give you some training, I say something usually to the effect of, unfortunately, I don't offer it anymore, just because I don't have the time. Maybe I will soon someday. But I always recommend you go see Jared, STA Training, hands down. He is the only other instructor I can think of that I completely recommend. He's got the same or similar style teaching as I do. He's not out there trying to play Billy Badass or impress anybody or talk down to anybody. He's just a down-to-earth dude who knows how to teach, and he goes with what works. Well, I was talking to him, and he made a really good point and kind of changed my mind on something. So it's worth bringing up that, one, I'm not stuck in my ways completely, and two, you can learn from other people. I made the comment about how I don't have, a Kestrel wind meter, and he said, well, you've got to have one. And I laughed and explained, I've never, and this is still true, I've never seen one of those be dead on. No matter how many people, true them up, no matter how much they do all these different things, always I've seen them use it, get some sort of result on a target, scratch their head, and go, oh, well, this wasn't inputted correctly, or, oh, it didn't calculate for this, and they still have to tweak and make an adjustment anyway to shoot, so I've always just thought, what a waste of time. But he made a great point. He said, Ryan, yes, you have to go shoot the actual stuff yourself. You can't just have the ballistic software be perfect every single time. You've got to know what your actual gun does in that actual circumstance, because the ballistic coefficient you're getting might not be accurate from the manufacturer, and all these other variables might change. He said, but you need to get your own data. He said, but Ryan, if you get all this data, how in the world are you going to know where to start when you're 3,000 elevation different? I said, you know what? All right, Jared, you got me there. That's a good point. I would just keep a dope book with all these variables so I can figure out what to do, but he's right. I can get my baseline for the rifle, but at least for a starting point, the software is a great way to take what I know for a fact and then get to this new location. And I had to laugh and admit, okay, maybe I should get one and try it out, because I should come at it like a new shooter who hasn't had years of just understanding how it works on my own. So I will get one. I'll check it out. Who knows? Maybe I'll try and be a dealer of one or something and get you guys some good deals. Maybe I'll start going to the ballistic software. Let my iPhone do all the shooting for me. Alter. I doubt it. I'm probably still going to be more at the shut up and shoot and get better at shooting instead of sitting there geeking out about all the numbers and still missing anyway. But I think there's room for me to try it a little bit, so I'll try it there. All right, next question Kyle had was left-handed guns, what I thought about them for left-handed shooters. Sure, great, get them. I mean, I'm going to be offering some of my collecting rifles in left-handed configurations. By the way, they're getting really close now. I have the components and the builds and everything getting together. And yes, I'm going to have left-handed models because I know that some of you guys don't have a good options out there for them. So if you're a left-handed shooter, you like a left-handed gun, get one. I mean, don't force yourself to shoot a right-handed gun if you don't have to. This all goes back to having the gun fit you properly. I want you to be comfortable and familiar with your gun and the system and how it works. Now, having said that, I've seen a lot of left-handed shooters run a right-handed gun better than right-handed shooters. That's because a right-handed bolt-action rifle requires you to take your firing hand off the gun to cycle the action. Now, almost every other type of shooting, that's not how you do it. Almost every other type of shooting, you keep your firing hand on the gun, and then your support hand is the hand that runs the gun. It's the one that gets the magazines in and out and racks the slide and just runs the operations of the gun, while the firing hand keeps its good grip and runs only the trigger. Well, with a bolt-action rifle, it's the exact opposite. You have to take your firing grip off every single time and re-get it back on. That's one of the reasons I hate thumbhole stocks or pistol grip chassis. I know a lot of the gee-whiz Mr. Cool shooters love them, and maybe I will switch over someday. But in actual experience, I think they take so long to get your hand off of that grip, up to the bolt, run the bolt, and get your hand back on. Again, in real-world situations, I think they slow you down horribly, and they allow you to impart too much control in your gun. But I know a lot of guys where their experience really only comes from the range or the internet. They like them. So before I disparage it too much or any more, I'll continue to try and keep an open mind, but they just don't work for me. That's because your right hand has to come off. Well, what if it was a left-handed gun? So if I was a right-handed shooter and a left-handed gun, I could keep my right hand on the grip, and I could just take my left hand off and completely run the gun like I do with every other weapon system. That actually might be a big benefit, and I've seen these left-handed shooters with right-handed guns do exactly that. They were able to run the bolt very quickly, especially when they were in alternate shooting positions. like a slung up, a seated, or a kneeling position, they could actually get to that bolt pretty quick when other people couldn't. The downside, of course, is if you're supporting the back of your rifle with your support hand, with a sandsock or something, you will be adjusting, where the rifle is. But you know what? Honestly, after most rifles recoil and after you're reloading the rifle, you probably got to get it back on target anyway. So especially when you're in an alternate position, you're not in the prone, and sometimes other cases, Kyle, yeah, left-handed guy, get a left-handed gun, it makes sense. But, I don't know, try embracing being left-handed, and it might actually make you better on one of those guns. So, alright, those are Kyle's questions. Scott wrote in with a good question, and I actually had to go look some stuff up and get back to him on this one. He had asked me about his Bushnell laser rangefinder, which I'm not familiar with those brand laser rangefinders. But he had said in his manual, he thought they maybe got it wrong in their explanation, or at least if it wasn't wrong, it wasn't explained as clearly as it could have been. Versus how they had it set up for like an archery mode and a rifle mode. So I had to go to the interwebs and look up their manual, and he's right. I didn't explain it wrong, but it's just not as well as it could have been explained, I think. So they have this archery mode that will automatically calculate the angle for you. And what it does is it just, of course, knows the angle it's looking at, and it takes the laser range-finding range, the true range to the target, and it does the math like I teach in the book on how the cosine and figures out what the angle range is. So if it's shooting down at a 500-yard target, well, it's a little far for archery, but let's just say a 500-yard target, it automatically does the math for you, and down lower in the screen, it shows you the angle range of 450 yards. That's pretty cool, because it automatically does the calculation for you. Well, in rifle mode, I think it tries to be too smart for its own good, and that's a problem. So in rifle mode, it'll give the actual distance, but then the angle range down at the bottom of the screen will say something like, up 34 inches, meaning the bullet is going to strike 34 inches high because of the angle. Well, the problem with that is, one, it completely presumes that it has all your data correct for your rifle. So I don't know if it's a ballistic software on its own, which again can be completely wrong, or if you have to enter it, the hard numbers, what the data is for you for each distance, which also could be wrong based on the environmental conditions you're in. So it's automatically assuming what your bullet is normally doing at that distance. And then it's taking into account the angle difference, so it's doing the math like from that 500 to the 450, there's a 34-inch difference for your bullet. Again, it'll be different for everybody's bullet and everybody's gun, how many inches of a difference of drop there would be between 450 and 500 yards. But so somehow it's doing all those calculations, and then it's telling you it's going to strike that high, which you then have to convert into minutes of angle or mils to make adjustments on your scope. I don't like that. I know it's trying to be helpful. I know it's trying to do a bunch of the steps for you, but by doing a bunch of the steps for you, it doesn't allow you to really get in and see what's really happening. So I just told him, if that's the case on his, keep it in archery mode. I'd rather see the 450-yard angle distance, and then I can look at my data, and then I can look at what I'm supposed to be doing at 450 yards and make those adjustments and know exactly which step to tweak instead of having some of it tweaked for me. So there's my input for your question there, Scott. Steve wrote in. He had some questions, all JP questions. He heard me talking about JP barrels, I guess, and asked me about the JP silent spring and what I thought. I think it's a novel idea. I think it's really cool. I'm going to get one of them and try it out someday. I know you can't do it with some 9mm conversions because there's too much, mass on that bolt carrier to work with it. But effectively, they took a silent captured spring, which is like on my ACR that I like so much, and use that to replace the typical buffer spring and buffer in an AR-15. So one, it's silent, it doesn't have that big sproing you hear in your ear, but two, it's also tunable. You can easily add and remove weights to it to get different cycling going on your gun. And he also asked me about the JP low mass bolt carrier groups and tuning the gun. Is it less recoil? Well, yeah, it can be. I mean, because part of the recoil is the bolt carrier slamming to the rear in your AR-15, and the other part is the actual recoil of the rifle firing. So if you got a gas system where you could tune it down just right, and you got a super light bolt carrier, you could tune that down to where you could almost feel no recoil at all. But the problem is you're going to start having some malfunctioning when you get too light and too low, because it's not going to have enough, kind of ass behind that bolt carrier to help to strip and feed another round out of the magazine. I like to err on the side of a heavier operating system. So guys that lighten their pistol slides, I get it. Maybe it's faster for them. I like heavier. I like a heavier bolt. I like a heavier slide. I like having that mass along with the spring power, because then it's just not relying on the spring to help carry through, especially when there's crud or the gun's not as oiled as it should be, or the round is a little stickier in that magazine for some reason, that mass coming forward really helps carry that round through and feed it in. And you can still tune your gas system to make it as light as you want. But sure, it works. I mean, the competition shooters are doing it for a reason. He asked what barrel contour we used on Jason's barrel. I use the light contour on all my JP barrels. I've ordered some for some people recently, not only Jason's build, but for myself. The light contour is really a medium contour for everybody else. Now, the heavy contour is just way too thick for it. It's more of a target shooting only, like in the prone target shooting only. It's not a movable, quote-unquote, tactical barrel. Again, the light contour is still medium. Now, both the contours are the same under the handguards. That's another reason I go with the light contour. They're both the same under the handguards. They get a little fatter at the gas block, and then the light contour gets back to the same medium contour, while the heavy stays thick. So it looks like sticking out you got this really thick barrel, but really it's the same thickness, whatever you can call it, under the handguards. So yeah, you have more weight at the end, but you don't really getting a stiffer barrel out of it because it's still going to be that same flex in the middle. So I like the light contour. If you guys need a JP barrel, I'm a dealer. Get one for me if you want. I'll be more than happy to send you one. And the more I order, the better deal I can get with them anyway. Great guys. The light contour is what I like. He asked what I thought about the JP dissipators, the heat dissipators. They have like a heat sink they put around the barrels. Yeah, great idea. Keeps the heat out of the barrel. I've never used one, probably won't. I mean, it's kind of a gee whiz novel idea, but I know they work. I've seen or heard of results of their dissipators and also the POF dissipators. They do one around the chamber, which may work a little better at dissipating the heat, because that's where the chamber is getting, the chamber is causing all this heat. But the barrel dissipator, although it may not remove as much heat, it might remove it better from the barrel where it needs to be. So sure, these are all cool things, just add-ons I've just never really gotten into. He also asked, will I be listing a parts list for my rifles? No, I'm not going to list a parts list for the rifles. Sorry, guys. Some of the parts you'll know where they come from, but I think some of the package is neat, is just trusting that I put it together and tested it. Some's going to be proprietary, some's going to be standard components. But some of these guys that list all the components, I think it's great. I mean, I'm not trying to keep it a super secret. I mean, I guess I am, but I'm not doing it just for the part of being secretive. I'm doing it also because when I see the laundry list of parts there, it either makes me question, well, why don't I just go get those parts and do it on my own? Or two, it takes some of the trust out of the system. Either you want the rifle from me or you don't, and that's fine. I don't plan on selling a whole lot of them, but I don't look at a parts list for my Toyota Tundra. I either want that truck because I trust them to build it with the right components or not, and that's what I'm going to try. If enough of you cry about it, maybe I'll put the parts list up there, but probably not. Now, the parts list for Jason's rifle and for the cheap rifles, of course we're going to do that. I want you guys to go off and do your own projects there. I think that'll be fun for you guys. So the last couple things I have to talk about comes with the barrel type. We talked about the barrels last episode on Jason's project, and I don't think we got into it enough because there's some things I left out that I wanted to add, and there's also some questions or comments I saw from some people. Specifically things like the chambers, 223 versus 556. I think Jason brought it up. I just don't remember we got that into it. You need to know what chamber you have, because that's really what dictates what cartridge you can put in there. And 223 Remington and 556 millimeter NATO are not the same thing. It is unsafe to shoot 556 ammo in a 223 chamber. Yes, you can do it. Yes, you might even be able to get away with it forever. But there's a great chance you won't. And there's a slight difference in the dimensions in the two cartridges. But the biggest difference is the pressure that's allowed. A 556 can have higher pressure. So the SAAMI specs, the SAAMI, the Sporting Arms and Ammunition Manufacturers Institute, is the standard bearing organization for all cartridges and rifles. And the idea is they don't come up with any of them. It's the people that make the cartridges will submit the info to SAAMI, and SAAMI just kind of standardizes it and keeps it on catalog for everybody. But essentially says, hey, if you're going to come up with a random cartridge like the 750 Kleckner, you got to tell us what's going on with this cartridge and what pressure specs to expect, so that when somebody else out there wants to make a gun to shoot 750 Kleckner, they know what safety standards they need to have their gun ready for. What that does is it makes sure that no matter who you buy a 750 Kleckner chambered rifle from, and no matter who you buy the ammunition from, they're going to safely fit together. So These SAMI standards are out there for this purpose. Well, SAMI lists these two cartridges as an unsafe combination, meaning that 5.56 pressure at its max, the maximum range that some company could load the ammo at, is too much if somebody else is making a rifle in 223 and they load it to the minimum standards for the 223. You could blow up a gun, you can cause some serious trouble. So do not put 5.56 in a 223. However, the other way around is just fine. You can shoot 223 in a 5.56 chamber all day, but the dimensions are slightly different, and so there could be some accuracy issues. I've never noticed any, but that's the direction you can go, not the other way around. There's some other chambers like 223 Wilde, is WYLDE, which is kind of a hybrid chamber. It's safe enough to shoot 5.56 in, but it's the dimensions that allow for some better accuracy out of it. That's actually what the chambers on my AR-15 rifles I'm going to be building for you guys for sale are going to be 223 Wilde, so it's a good mix in the middle. But some of the reasons I like these JP rifles that I didn't talk about the barrels is they do some amazing stuff to the barrels. They do all the things that everybody else is paying a lot of money extra to do later. You know, like they're hand lead lapping a barrel. And the only way I've ever seen barrels hand lead lapped is they actually pour a slug of molten lead down the barrel and let it cool. And they push that little plug out now, and that plug is a perfect mold of the barrel. They can cut grooves in that plug and put some lapping compound, which is just an abrasive compound, and then they push that plug with the abrasive compound back and forth through the barrel. And since it's a perfect match, it can fit the barrel perfectly and spin through those lands and grooves, and any imperfections in the barrel will be hard enough that they'll move the soft lead out of the way, but the rubbing compound will be able to get to them and polish them down. And so what you end up with when you do that is just almost a mere polished, perfect barrel. Whereas if you're getting some barrels off the shelf now from modern manufacturers, sadly, you can get barrels from some very classic rifles that look like corn cobs on the inside because they're just, the processes, the quality control is getting bad enough, and they're trying to be cheap enough to compete, but these barrels get extremely rough. You can even feel on some of them dragging the patches as you go through the rifle to clean them. So that's why some people talk about breaking in the rifles. Well, you're buying a high-end rifle, the high-end barrel. I honestly believe there's zero need to break that barrel in. It's already been done for you. By no means should you be getting in there with a compound or abrasive bullets and trying to do this like forced, polishing or lapping on your barrel. I think you're just going to ruin a nice barrel. So a high-end quality barrel, it's going to be fine. But a cheap rifle or not a cheap rifle, an everyday rifle, yeah, you're going to see accuracy improvements. You're going to get that barrel smoother because as that bullet goes flying down the barrel, the heat and the pressure are going to take all those imperfections down and polish it up. I've seen some needing as many as 100 or 200 rounds to actually get smooth on some of the bad examples I'm seeing coming out of some factories now. Or as little as 10 to 20 rounds will be enough to take some of the roughness off and polish that barrel out. So you're already getting one that's already polished. They're also doing things that I don't even believe really has that much of an effect, but they're doing them and it works, so why not? They're doing things like cryogenically freezing the barrels, so all the molecules are getting aligned, so you get some better stiffness and better resistance to heat and temperature changes. They're already doing all these things for you, so of course they're a great expensive barrel. Do you need them? No! I'm going to use them because I want to build the best rifle I can, but you absolutely don't need them at all. Any medium to high quality barrel is going to be great for most of the shooting you're going to need. And when it comes to bolt guns, you'll have guys that'll get in fist fights over which barrel company makes the best barrels. The fact is, unless you're bench rest shooting and you're measuring in fractions and fractions of a minute of angle, it doesn't matter. And even if you are doing that, I don't think it matters because you might have one that works perfectly for you, but they change the machine and how they're doing something rifling a couple days later, and it might not work as good for your load anymore. Someone else's barrel might work. So any of the top manufacturers are going to be fine. Bartline, Schillen, Lilja, all those barrels, I bet I could lie to you and tell you which one was which and might confirm your bias, but they're all going to shoot great. And you're not going to have to break them in or do anything like that. So don't worry about that, guys, so much. I hope that answers a lot of your questions. Sorry we didn't get to do the project. Jason and I didn't have time to link up. We'll bring it to you next time. Pay attention for the rules on the El-Cheapo build. Give me some of your ideas on how I should give this rifle away to you guys. I'll tell you right now, my rifle has a 4-inch handguard and a pink polymer lower. So it looks a little ridiculous. but I'm hoping it makes it through the test firing, and I'm hoping it's going to be cheap enough. Again, spread the word. I appreciate you guys. I hope you're appreciating what you're getting here from the podcast. If you do, tell me. If you don't, I'd love to say keep your opinion to yourself, but I want to hear about it. I want to hear what you'd like me to talk about, how you'd like me to cover some information. This podcast is beneficial for you. All right, guys. Thanks. Until next time. Take care.